everyone. I'm Liz Hunt.
And I'm Chelsea Poppens.
And this is the Agency Rocket Show, where we talk about all things related to creative business and the general chaos of running an agency.
Whoop whoop.
Yeah. Good stuff. So today we're going to talk about, we have two options.
Nope. You're going to pick the option. You just go. Just run with it.
Okay. Let's talk about client edits. Recently, I was chatting with a friend of mine who works for a different agency. And he was telling me that at their agency, when a client sends edits, they just do them. Like, they don't ever give pushback. They don't ever get an opinion on anything. If the client gives them edits, they just do the edits. And honestly, I was kind of floored because this agency is 4 times the size of ours. And they have, designers, art directors, project managers, account managers, account executives, and just layers upon layers upon layers of people. And people whose sole job it is to be the people, people managers, people whose job it is to manage the clients, and that's their whole job. And I was just really surprised by that, especially because,
Do you think they charge more money in order to have kind of an unlimited? This
agency?
Yeah.
I know they charge more money than we do, at our agency, because, they're huge. So they have, 4 times the overhead that we do, right? Actually, more than 4 times overhead. Just to me, I've just always had the mindset of we're the experts, not the client. And you've heard me say this before, where if a client ever sends a book of edits, I always purposefully go find something to push back on. Even if all their edits are stupid and nitty gritty things that don't matter at all, I will purposely find stuff to tell them no on, just to prove a point that the client is not in charge of this project, that we are in charge, we are the experts, and all this stuff. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
No, I like the way we do it. We intentionally make it clear that we're driving the car, and that we respect and we appreciate the client's input, and we take it and gain direction from that. Obviously, we have that's why we have long discovery sessions, so we can get the client's opinion in the beginning. But we are the experts. That's why clients should be hiring us. And I like the way we do it at DayCloud, where we have 2 rounds of client edits, which sets the boundary that our client needs to put everything together and get it to us in that phase that we're in of the project. And then that they have one more. And I also think it helps us to not go out of scope. So I'm thinking maybe if that larger agency, maybe they go over scope all the time, but maybe they have that unlimited edits involved in order to make room for those unlimited edits. So they have a cushion built into their initial price.
Yeah. Surely, okay, I guess I don't really know how other agencies do it, except for maybe a couple. But surely no agency has unlimited edits. That just seems
excessive,
outrageous to me. How would you ever make any money? Because clients would eat you alive, right?
And the designers would constantly have to be we get small petty edits where it's the designer has to open the file, make that edit, export it in the right format. Yeah. And then it takes that time for whereas us making sure that all the edits are accounted for. Yeah. And then our designer goes in and makes all those changes at one time. It saves time on our end and budget.
Yeah. Yeah. just like the other day, you had someone emailing, a current client of ours, emailing about, they were wanting us to do, what was it? They were wanting us to do something, and we're like, okay, it's going to cost this much. And they were like, okay, well, they didn't say it was too much, but they were basically like, well, okay, what about this email header? Because they're like, it's going to be too much. They didn't ever say it was too much, but they were just like, well, what if we only had you guys do this? And it's like, hey, we still have to like design the work and still have to open our software, and like, just because it's on a smaller canvas doesn't mean you don't have to still do the work.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very like small dollar change. I don't think they realized that you still have to design no matter what.
Yeah.
Like whether we're printing it or whether you're emailing it, like it's still being designed.
Yeah.
Like
still are spending our time on this. Yeah.
So I'm like, that's why like it's important to even just have minimums for what your designer's going to do, because at certain levels, I mean, it needs to be like at least whatever amount minimum in order to actually do a design project. So that you're actually making money and making use of your time.
Yeah, make it worth your time to even open up your software. Yeah. And email them, make it worth your time to even have a conversation with that person. And back to the edits, like what you were saying about, we do 2 rounds of edits per deliverable. And so, or like per kind of like phase of the project. So like if it's a website, it's like they get 2 rounds of edits on the wireframe, and then they get 2 rounds of edits on the design, right? And so we allow that because like a website is a ton of work, like we're not just going to give them 2 rounds of edits on the final piece, because, like that's not really fair, right? Like if they only get 2 rounds of edits on the final piece of the design, we're going to have to redo the whole thing at the end, so we do 2 rounds of edits throughout the process, and like throughout each kind of like primary deliverable. Yeah. Throughout the phases. Yeah. Or the primary deliverables that we have within each phase. So it does make it a little tricky, I think, because it actually, I think it puts more pressure on us to manage those rounds of edits. Don't you think, Chelsea?
Yeah, I think the way we say it is always like, 1, setting expectations up in the beginning, and 2, keeping track of the rounds of edits that clients are sending you on your internal side. And then communicating that to the client so that they're like, oh yeah, like we're at round 1. And just like constantly communicating so that it's clear where you are at in that process and where those boundaries are, so that they know that what falls out of scope and what they're getting charged for, so that they're never surprised by like, oh, that fell out of scope and I'm getting charged the hourly rate right now for this phase of edits because it's out of our second round.
Yeah.
Clear communication always helps in those relationships, no matter what it is.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we do in order to help with that clear communication is we put 2 rounds of edits per deliverable. That language, we say 2 rounds of modifications from the client per deliverable. We say that in our contracts. And then we say anything above and beyond that goes to our hourly rate. And our hourly rate is X. It's changed here and there. At one point it was $140 an hour. We've bumped it up to $200 an hour, depending on the client. So, and we do that in the contract because that allows us a contract to fall back on when a client is like, okay, round 3, round 16. We're like, okay, sure. Here's the estimate for all the extra work. It's going to cost you an extra 4 hours at $200 an hour. Do you still want to proceed? And they say yes or no, right? Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. So At least you're getting paid.
I know a lot of people who have worked with or who are jaded from working with marketing agencies because they'll just do the work and then they'll invoice later. And then when the client gets that invoice, they're like, oh, well, what are these additional charges? You never let me know that this was like an additional charge. And so they end up paying extra without even realizing it until the end. And then that's what creates that terrible relationship or negative connotation with agencies, because they're like, oh, every agency that I've worked with has kind of like screwed me in some way. Or they don't provide the quality service or work that they promised.
That's a really good point. We've really tried to like set those expectations up front, but it means that the way that you do that is by having some of those awkward conversations in the beginning. But it's so that you don't have to have a difficult conversation later on when it's like, hey, you went over the scope, like this was scope creep, so now you owe me an extra $1,000. Well, instead of doing that, because that surprises people, like, and people do not like surprises, people do not like change, except for me. I love surprises and I love change. But most people don't. And so like if you say from the beginning, hey, 2 rounds of edits, if we go over that, then it's, you know, we go to hourly rates. And then throughout the project, you let them know, okay, here's round 1 of edits. And then when you're emailing them, you just put it in the subject of the email. That's all you have to do. And then when they send you a second round, you say, okay, here's second round of edits, second and final round of edits, right? And then if they send a third round, you say, this is great. We're happy to do this. Here is an estimate for the additional round of edits. That's all you have to do. You don't have to make it weird. You don't have to be like, no, we can't do this. Our contract is whatever. You just say, yes, we'd love to do these. And here is the estimate. And give them an estimate for the additional round of edits. And then they can choose if they want to do that or not.
Yeah. It's just like we mentioned in one of our previous podcasts, it's like always operating from a yes mentality and then like letting the client be the one that kind of like says, oh no, that doesn't work with what I want to do.
Hit the brakes. Yeah, exactly. Being a solutions driven person, not like a no person, you know, like that's a huge part of our culture is we say yes and instead of saying nope, you can't do that, client. You just say, yeah, we can do that and it's going to cost you more. So great, you know. We'd be happy to do that for you, you know. But you also don't surprise
this large amount of money.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's always a really good way to go about it, and that's how we like to do it. What about, so like that's if they try to scope, if there's like scope creep. So that's edits that are like scope creep, right? What about edits that are like just bad, like outright wrong, we shouldn't do them, you know, bad ideas, that kind of thing? What do we do about
those? Are you talking about like poor taste in design?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we've had, I mean, there's different ways to frame it. Like in some instances that are coming to mind right now, it's like, there is one instance where I was like, you can say like, it's not best practice to do a certain thing. What, like on website stuff, if someone comes off the rail with like a suggestion in the client feedback, it's like, can you do this? You're like, well, that's not really best website practices. And we don't recommend doing that. Framing it in that way. Or even like we had someone suggest we're doing like a billboard graphic for someone and they wanted like an image on there or an image in a place where like I wouldn't recommend because the initial image actually made sense from the audience that we were trying to reach. So just like framing it in a way you're like, yes, we can do that, but we wouldn't recommend it because of that instance. The photo in there was placed there because that's why the intention of why our designers made that choice. Like explaining the why we did things, I think definitely helps because like clients want to have ideas, but they don't always understand. We are the experts. So that's an instance of just driving the car for a reasoning of why something was created the way it was.
Yeah. Another tactic that I have used is I will like design out the idea that they created, and then I'll design out a better option and just be like, hey, here's your idea. And then here's another one that I created that I recommend we move forward with. Let me know which one you like better, And I just show them that like,
their idea is bad.
Their idea is bad. Like, I just show them like as a good comparison. Like, here's a really good idea, and here's your really terrible idea. I'll let you decide.
But sometimes that does, like, as we found out this year, we're like, they'll understand. Like when they see this in comparison, they'll be like, "Oh, that's a bad idea," but they loved it. And that was just like an example of someone who has very poor taste in design.
Yep, exactly.
We're like, oh no.
That backfired. Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. Or like, do you remember the one where they wanted on their homepage of their website, first thing that shows up on their website, they wanted it to say, pleasing you pleases us. Do you remember that?
Yeah, how can I forget?
And we were like, oh, yeah.
Do you not see what we see?
Like, are you sure? Like, are you really sure? Like, that's what you want to go with.
We intentionally hit it like in the site. Like we did it, but we like put it on a different page. And then we brought it back to them to show them the website. And they're like,
no.
we wanted it on the homepage.
Pleasing you pleases us.
Whatever you want.
Okay. And so then there are times like that. Like sometimes you win. And like sometimes the client will like see, honestly, 98% of the time we win. The client sees our ideas and realizes their ideas were terrible and that we're way better at this than they are. But then there are those 2% of times when that happens and the client is like, nope, we want our idea. And you just, in those times, you just have to realize that like,
pick your battles.
They are paying your bills and, it's just going to be how it is, and you just won't show their stuff in your portfolio. So
also, not everybody's as perverted minded as us. So they might not even see it like that.
I don't believe that at all. I'm pretty sure every single person listening to this
is
thinking the exact same thing that we are. So what other tactics do I deploy? Like if we are like, ooh, this is a bad idea. We try to use reason and logic, like, hey, this just, like, it just doesn't work. Like, even just logistically, it doesn't work. Another one that I specifically will use is, hey, this is, like, think about who your audience is, because a lot of times, sometimes clients can be thinking about personal preference rather than like, well, I just don't like the color yellow, and it's like, cool. But like, we also have to think about who your audience is and what your brand is supposed to mean to them, and so, a lot of times we can work around clients' preferences, right? Like that's something that I think we as creatives can figure out how to do. Like that's part of, I think, being ultra creative is that you can create within certain limitations, right? One of them being a client's stylistic preferences. But we also have to really seriously consider the audience, right? And so that's something that I have used in conversations and when I am trying to win a design with a client, which is like, okay, but our audience, they are going to love this, that, and the other thing type of a conversation. I'll use that quite a bit too.
Yeah, I think we do a great job of working in logic into our way of saying like that's not going to work. Like, for instance, one of our clients wanted our stylescapes, a branding. So our stylescapes are built around a certain vision, like soft, like calming. So like sometimes the logo is going to have like elements within it that are soft, that make it look soft, or like a round. And then they want like a different logo and a different stylescape to be placed in that concept, that other stylescape. And you're like, well, that's not going to work because these hard edges, these sharp pieces of this logo don't work with like the soft elements that we've created for this stylescape. So then like there's ways for us to say no because it's harder to work a specific logo into an overall concept sometimes. And so then we can say no in that way. Yeah,
that's a good point.
Like technicality.
And and that's actually a really good point, because there are some times that I just go like super designer speak on people. This is going to sound terrible, but like just to get them to like back down. Like back off of it, like at some point. And I don't do this often.
You're like, I'm going to use big words to make you understand that I am the expert in this.
Yeah, a little bit. Like and seriously, we've had this agency for, I think it's been almost 12 years now. And I have done this less than a handful of times where I go like full designer speak on them, just to kind of like be like, hey, sit down and shut up, please. Like seriously. And
I'll add a disclaimer where I'm like, Liz does this not that often. So.
Yeah. Yes. Like seriously, it's maybe been 3 times ever.
She doesn't bully people with designer speak that often.
It's not bullying. It's not bullying. I don't bully anyone. But it's just like hey, just stop. Like you don't know. Okay. And I really do know. And you don't know. it's what I'm trying to say, And so I'll say things like, the stylistic approach that we took is abstracted illustration, like just hardcore. And the letting is, I'll say that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I don't ever use that kind of language. I say, we made it really approachable. Everything's really rounded and puffy, so you can see that it's really friendly and approachable. I'll say stuff like that. That makes people understand stuff better.
We use a lot of tactics in order to kind of
convince and persuade and yeah, that's true. Yeah, persuade people to our side. That's very, very true.
At the end of the day, we don't like making client edits.
Truthfully, yes. Oh, okay. So thank you for saying that too, because there have been times like, what do we do when a client is like either really mean about edits or a client has the most ridiculous edits? This should be moved underneath this. And like the most like things that do not matter. Which one do you want to tackle first? Mean edits or petty edits?
Oh, petty edits.
Okay.
I'm resonating with that one this week.
Okay, so what do we do about those? I know what I do.
Lead the way.
Okay. Well, when it's petty edits, that's usually when we get the book of edits. And when that happens, usually what I like to do is I give the client a call. And I say, hey, what is the goal here? What's your goal with this stuff? Like, and can you tell me? And then they say whatever they say. And then I say, okay, so why did you say this? And then I ask about specific things. Like, why did you want the signature of the executive director? Why did you want the signature to be directly below and not beside his name? And then they'll say something like, well, it's because that's just how we've always done it. And I'll be like, okay, so there's not an actual reason. And I'll be like, okay, so tell me again what the goal is here. We're trying to get donors or, whatever it is. Like, okay, so how about, and then I help us realign on things on the call. And I say, help me understand what we're trying to do and what the goal of this is, right? And then I really kindly point out that their edits are really stupid and that we're not going to do them and that they don't matter. The things that they're asking us to do don't matter. And then I point out the ones that I'm like, hey, okay, so talk to me about this. You didn't feel like this one really hit the mark. Tell me more about that, and I ask for clarity and I talk through things and I'm like, but some of these more petty ones, I don't say petty, but I'm like, but some of these more specific ones, like,
why?
Yeah. Like, why? And then they can't answer. So then they
realize. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's been one that comes to mind. I can't name drop or anything, but I think we politely pushed back on some of them, but I think it came to a point where we had to actually talk to the main person and tell her that the relationship isn't going as smoothly as possible because of nitpicky or petty stuff over, it was social media. So it wasn't crazy important. Yeah. It wasn't a large project that's like absolutely permanent. It's just like more like social media posting or stories or things. And so it's like very petty, small, nitpicky things on like social media graphics or like periods needing to be places or like things along those lines that we actually just had to be like, hey, this relationship could go smoother if it was like, if we understand that this isn't ride or die. Like the importance of this isn't here. It's actually like here. And for the sake of your time and efficiency on our end, good enough is good enough sometimes.
You pay us double our fee because this is freaking ridiculous.
Yeah. That is an instance where you're like, you're only paying like, you're not paying enough to be this nitpicky. That is a thing. I'm like, you could pay us like a crap ton in order to pay attention to all these petty. I'm like,
sure.
There's a line.
Still only get 2 rounds of edits. Yeah, that's true. Very, very, petty edits. We really try to put the kibosh on that. And usually it's something that I take on with the client. It's not something I let our designers do. And that's actually kind of like a protocol in our office is if a client sends us a lot of edits, the team is supposed to let me know if they're really minor, stupid little things, because at that point, that's like a red flag to me that the client is trying to play art director. And I don't allow that. Like, I'm the creative director.
And you do a great job of squashing things and saying things and saying it in an articulate way that isn't disrespectful. Whereas I'm like, fuck this. and you're like, yeah, you're not talking to the client, Chelsea. You're like, nah, I got this. Or it'll be like, I'm like, Liz, can you handle this one? You're so much prettier and more charismatic and so much more articulate than me. And you're so good at handling all these difficult conversations.
You only say that so you don't have to call them and have all the hard conversations.
I still have a fair share of hard conversations.
Yeah,
but
there's plenty to go around. That's true.
Sometimes I'm just like, Liz, you're so much better at it than me.
Well, yeah, because I've screwed it up a lot.
And also you're like, yeah, I don't want Chelsea to offend somebody.
I promise you that's not what I'm thinking.
The funny thing is, like, we say what we think to each other. We're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And when we talk to the clients, we're just like, so, like, you know, the memes where they're like, oh, this is the professional way of saying, like, fuck this. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. And you're like, I'll like say what I'm thinking in the office, and you'll be like, you catch more bees with honey. And I'm like, I'm not gonna tell the client this. I'm like, who do you think I am?
Yeah, I know.
Do I want to get fired? No.
Yeah. And a lot of those difficult conversations, my primary tactic for it is like leading with questions almost every time. It's like, hey, client, what do you think about all these edits you're sending? Even that is like kind of throws people off and they don't know how to respond a lot of times. Or I'll be like, hey, like, why did you like this specific edit? What did you mean by this? Or can you clarify why it needs to be this way? Or can you explain like your reasoning for this? I don't say it like that. Even that is like a little too accusatory. So like, hey, can you tell me more about what you were thinking when you said this? Mm-hmm. You know, that's a nicer way even. So I just ask a lot of questions, and that's how I
kind of just imply that they need a question. No, you do it subtly. You subtly imply that they should question their feedback a little bit. Like
I get them to reconsider, you know, and
like,
I do.
They're asking. They sound unsure of my edits, so I'm like, I should feel unsure of what I said in a nice way. Yeah, but not attacking.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that's the thing is like client edits, it really shouldn't be adversarial. You really should be a partner with your client, and like your goals should all be the same. You should be aligned. And so like that's one of the things with when you're doing client edits is like you guys are on the same side. We are on the same side with our clients. We don't have a hidden agenda. Like I want my clients to succeed, and I don't know that they want me to succeed, but whatever. Like some of them do, some of them don't, I'm sure. But that's neither here nor there. But like my goal is to help them reach their goals, right? And so like I don't want the relationship to be full of tension or, you know, any sort of like contentious nature have any contentious nature at all, right? So like that's why being able to have those difficult conversations in a very non-defensive, unassuming way is like really key, actually. Being able to have those conversations leading with questions is like really powerful because the client responds really well to that, and it gets you back in alignment, you know, and it helps you get rid of all those edits that you didn't want to have. Which leads to our last point, which is when you have really mean client edits.
Trying to remember.
Stop it. You're trying to remember?
I have one, but I don't remember how you just talk to him. I have one in mind where you just kind of talk to him. You're just like, I think I remember you saying, we have different communication styles and don't think we're a good fit. That's what it came to. But
I wasn't thinking about firing the client. I mean, just like when they
but that was after multiple mean comments.
That was like an actual difference of Like,
Yeah.
we were never going to fix the issue.
Yeah. And you actively said, like, hey, your comments are kind of disrespectful towards my team. And
and it never got better.
Yeah. I mean, there's been other times where they're like, oh, your design looks like a Canva creation or a Canva template. And you're like,
Yep.
Actually.
Yeah. Or we show up to a meeting and they ambush us, with whatever, that's happened before. I'm talking about the like voicemails that we've gotten where they're like, hey, this totally misses the mark and I don't know what to do. I don't even know, that kind of stuff. I've had I've had phone calls where someone called me. She was a brand new marketing person I was working with. And I had been working on this client for years and years. And she was brand new to the team, not my team, the client's team. And she was like, it looks like somebody just threw it up on the page and just slapped it up there. And I was like, oh my God. But I've had people say, like, it looks like clip art, We've had people say, like you said, it looks like a Canva template. What else? Yeah, we've had some pretty insulting things.
I think it's always, though I can't think of anything like specific where we're handled in we're handled in any other way where we didn't like broach the topic and talk to them about it and be like, hey, how did we miss the mark? Or, hey, you said this in the beginning. That's why we created this. So in our minds, we hit the mark because we were listening to you in these ways. Every like specific things that the client had said that they wanted or a vision that we were trying to replicate. I think like explaining those things, we've done a good job of like counteracting those mean comments just by saying, hey, you said this is why we created this. And so your comment is pretty like dramatic.
Yeah. Usually something like that being said kind of kickstarts two different things. One, in my mind, I immediately start planning for when we can fire that client.
Or when we can send the final invoice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, seriously, for real though, like you can't always, and sometimes you just have to like push through. To me, I always follow through with what I said I would do. And so I would never, because of something that some client offended me or, unless it were something like, illegal or, serious abuse, something like that. But if they were insulting our work,
we find a way to wrap it up.
Well, yeah, we always finish the project, is what I'm saying. Like I follow through on what we said we were going to do. But if something like that happens, I am immediately already planning in my head for okay, we are not going to work with you after we finish this because we just don't operate that way. That's not part of who we are. Part of who we are at DayCloud is that we operate in kindness and we treat our clients with kindness and we expect to be treated with kindness as well. Kindness is not always nice. You don't always have to be nice. Sometimes you have to be firm and sometimes you have to be honest. And that's not always nice, but being kind it's always a foundation for every relationship that we have. Right. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you still have to have difficult conversations and that is still being kind, even in difficult conversations. Okay. So that's a side note, but, so that's the first thing I do is I am planning for the end, right? The second thing I do is I call that person, whoever made those terrible comments, I call them immediately.
Because it's easier to say things through text or email than it is to say them out loud for most people.
That is exactly right. Because that is actually a very good point. Because almost every time it has not been on the phone or Zoom with me. It's always been a voicemail or an email that someone has said those terrible things. There's been twice that someone has said in a meeting, it was clip art, and the other one, it was a voicemail. No, it was over the phone, but it was somebody I didn't know, and she was just being super mean. So, but that's, every other time it's been email and voicemail. So you're right. It is way, way easier to be mean on when there's not someone else looking back at you. So I call them immediately. Go ahead.
It is important to nip it in the butt right away, because otherwise you can, if you kind of force through for too long, it creates a toxic environment for your employees, your designers, for everybody involved, because one, you don't look forward to being a part of that project, no matter you don't look forward to seeing any emails come into your inbox from that specific person. And so then it just creates a cycle of just like not bitterness towards that relationship and that being a part of that project, and it's not fruitful for anybody involved.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the second thing I do is I get a hold of that person and I say, what's going on? Like, what happened? Why do you feel this way? And then I say, okay, here's the plan. And I say, tell me what the problem is. And then I get their feedback, and then I make a plan for how we're going to fix it. And then I let the client know, and then stop it. We can go for however long we want, Chelsea.
I know. And however many people drip off after that hour is
fine. It's fine. So, but the other thing is, like, I will take that back to my team. And to your point, I always check in with them, because when you get something like that from a client, the team is going to take it really hard. The person who actually did the work that was super insulted, they're going to take it really hard. And then everyone else on the team is going to be offended for them, like on their behalf. And so it's my job as creative director and being in charge of the team, to like help them process and help them
understand that it's not like a personal attack on them.
Yes. And help them know that I see it different. Help them know that, hey, that client was wrong to say that. They should not have said that. They need to know that, like, I am on their side. And that's something that I always try to do, is like help them know that, like, I'm going to defend them. I'm on their team. We're going to fix it, and I'm going to help. They're not alone in this. Yes, what the client said was really crappy, and they should not have said those things. But here's the path that we're going to take to fix it. And I'm really sorry that happened, And just, saying whatever I can to help them get past those hurt feelings, because that's what happens. Like, clients say mean things, and it hurts your feelings. And, like, it's going to happen. So, like, that's part of my job, too, is helping the team process through the offense and the hurt, and in order to not allow that stuff to steal their creativity, because it can. There's a lot.
I think we could have a whole other episode around client edits and working through those. But as we wrap up, not to cut you off, Liz. Oh my gosh, I'm here the bad. She's the good cop. I'm the bad cop. It's fine.
Always.
But as we wrap up this episode of talking about client edits, what to do about petty edits, what to do about mean edits, and how to interact with your client in those scenarios. Hope you liked our episode. Like, share, follow, send us an email @. We have multiple emails, but shoot us an email with your feedback. We'd love to hear it. Mostly good. None of the bad, but happy day.
Yeah.
Good podcast.
Woo.
Goodbye.